Welcome to our first virtual VIP event for NADA Miami 2020. We're thrilled to launch the start of our online panel series with PAMM curator Maria Elena Ortiz, who will be giving you a sneak preview of her top picks from NADA Miami, which will officially launch tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Joining Maria Elena today on the panel are the selected galleries: Night Gallery, Kendra Jane Patrick, False Flag, Proyectos Ultravioleta, Embajada, Parish Heinen, and 80 meters squared. We ask that everyone keep their microphones off unless you're in direct discussion with Maria Elena, and feel free to leave your video cameras on, but note that the panel is being recorded. And please ask plenty of questions in the chat and we'll address the questions at the end of the talk. So Maria Elena, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Heather, and thank you, Nada, for having me this afternoon. I'm very happy to be here, delighted to be here. You know, I got the pleasure to see the sneak preview of all the galleries in the fair, and it's very exciting, the work that's out there this year. So it was very difficult to come to this selection. And I really wanted to show everyone kind of an overview of what you can see at NADA. There's galleries, you know, exciting galleries from LA, New York, Latin America, the Caribbean, giving you a perspective of the international and national approach that this fair has. Perhaps one of the things that excites me more about NADA is its emerging focus and how you can really get a lot of artists that are right now up and coming, and you're really getting it at a great moment in their careers. And similar with the galleries that are here today, some of the galleries here are also, you know, exciting and provocative, and so on. So one of the first galleries that that I selected, it is Night Gallery, which is a gallery from LA. Certainly the entire it's pretty neat. Again, going with this idea of a younger emerging. And I also, what I appreciated a lot about Night Gallery was its focus in terms of African-American diaspora artists. So the two artists that are here on view are actually, one is here on the screen, as you can see. And the two artists are Candace Williams and Carrie Johnson Ricks. And perhaps now I wanted to invite Brian Fassett from Night Gallery to tell us a little bit about the works here that we're getting to watch.
Hi guys, yeah, so we're really excited to be showing at the gallery and in the online viewing room right now new sculptures by Candace Williams. She's having really an exciting year right now. Work is on view currently at Simon Lee Gallery in New York, in the Made in LA biennial at the Hammer Museum, as well as the Huntington Museum. And also she has a...
They didn't come. Oh yeah.
Hello?
If you, for everyone, if you can, you know, if you can mute yourself while we are in the presentation, that's just greatly appreciated. So thank you for that. But Brian, you were saying about, you know, she's now Made in LA, which is really cool.
It is, yeah, it's really fantastic, as well as she has her first museum solo exhibition at the Institute of Contemporary Art at VCU right now, which awesome. Actually that show very much relates to this work here, which are new sculptures that are made collages onto artificial plants.
Wow.
For her, this metaphor of thinking about mainly tropical plants that have had to go through either classification or forced migration has become this sort of very meaningful metaphor for her over the past year. I think the beginning of that thought for her started while working on the exhibition at the Hammer Museum, because she was also able to have access to the Huntington Museum Library and Botanical Gardens archives. So that sort of planted the seed, sorry for the bad metaphor, of this metaphor of plants and their ability to adapt and be versatile when put into forced migration as this larger metaphor for her. And as you can see, these all are images that are from the Alan Lomax archives, as well as some that are from pornographic magazines, as well as documentation of Uruguayan tango. And actually the first one that we showed is all this early documentation of the Uruguayan tango, which for her has become also like a really interesting way of mapping and thinking about migrations of culture, you know, over the years.
So the work is very, very beautiful, yet it has like a lot of political undertones in the work. Is that correct?
Oh, that is very much correct. That's the case for Candace in general. And then the next, do we want to move on to Carrie Johnson-Ricks, who is a new younger artist based in Jersey City. He'll be having his first solo show with us at Night Gallery this spring, which we're really excited about. And his work really consistently is these beautiful collages that are very intricate with ink and watercolor painting on top of them. And he's someone who's been very deeply influenced by different kinds of like movement traditions as a way to think about community as well as like passing on traditions. And when those vary from something as much as like sports or martial arts to Jersey dance music and weightlifting and all of these really very physical movement traditions are something that inspire him and the figurative work that he makes.
And just out of curiosity, so are these images taken from somewhere, some specific place, or is he painting the works? Like, how are these made?
So this actually, this one in particular is modeled from someone that he is friends with, that I believe is very much engaged in this martial arts tradition. So some of it is collecting these images and using them, and some of it is actually working from models in his real life too.
Yeah, it feels like layers upon layers of paper and textures and color and movement. Really, really beautiful.
Yeah, they're very delicate at once, but also I think that there's something that's nice about the duality of the delicacy of the material, but also all of the figures in his work always are very like strong, and there's a lot of strength and tension in the representation of the figure. So that sort of interplay is what makes the work kind of exciting. And something we were just touching on before we started too is these are all hung directly onto the wall using these really beautiful handcrafted pens that are bejeweled. So that's how they go directly hung onto the wall.
But you could also frame them if you wanted to, correct?
You could, definitely.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, these are beautiful, and you can see the scale also in this image that they're not, they're quite substantial in terms of sizing, which is really nice. Yeah. And again, like I felt like, I really like your whole, to be very honest, I liked your whole selection at Night Gallery, so I really recommend it to everyone here. But also I was really taken by, the emerging kind of effervescence like that you feel when looking into the works that you see in your selection, your presentation.
Yeah, thanks. And we, both artists are young, and we're really excited about them both. And we'll have shows with them in the next year at the gallery too. So, keep an eye on this space.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Now, if we go to the next selection. Now, this is a gallery from New York named Kendra Jane Patrick, another kind of young, emerging like African-American artist that I also thought was quite neat. And I do want to say that in my selection, I did very purposely included 3 female gallerists, because I do think it's to support. So I was also very excited that this was, part of this presentation. So perhaps, Kendra, you're here with us, right? So perhaps you can tell us a little bit about the work. And this is just one artist, right? You're doing just one presentation.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Maria Elena, thank you so much for selecting my program. Yes, so for NADA, we have decided to show one of my favorite young guns. Her name is Qualisha Wood. Qualisha is very young. She's actually finishing up her MFA at Cranbrook in Detroit right now. So I think, for her, it's been a really exciting year, right? For just being so young and really finding herself developing a fantastic both fan and patronage base, I would say. These new works, I think one of the really exciting things about this is so what you're looking at are works that are tuftings. And, Qualisha's first series of work was a very successful series of tapestries. And, you know, it was interesting, I think, right between Switzerland, where I've been since the March lockdown, New York to Detroit, like between everywhere, kind of just, going kind of dealing with COVID and Switzerland certainly being a hot spot. I know that it was, you know, it's just an interesting year to think about what to make. And so I think the thing that really struck me about these tuftings is almost this diaristic element that does not necessarily, that are not really a part of the tapestries, but seem to have developed from the tuftings. And, you know, I would say that maybe the 3 kind of points of departure, right, in order to really get a feel for, you know, how the what and the why connect in Qualisha's works. I would say the notion of the avatar. I would also name Instagram and the way that social media has transformed the notion of the Black female figure over the past 10 years. And then I think I would directly connect that to Zoomer culture, right? Like I'm a millennial, but now the Zoomers, right, the generation under are coming up now, right? They're teenagers and they have a really kind of interesting way of relating to one another online that's different and foreign for me. And I think that for Qualisha, right, I think it's just a different way of seeing yourself as a Black woman, seeing yourself on Instagram, seeing yourself in, right, Kim Kardashian's drag. So I think all of this has really, really affected the Black female figure. And I think that if the tapestries, you have these kind of like social media-esque selfie kind of pictures that are hundreds of Photoshop layers deep. This is just, right, the very petite Qualisha kind of weaving every tuft on, and they just kind of became about the actual year that she's been having, right? That all of us.
But also like emojis.
Yeah, exactly.
But at the same time, you know, the imagery that she's creating is quite powerful. I mean, I'm reminded of Betty Saar and some of kind of the compositions that she's making.
I think, you know, I thought about Betty Saar, and I also thought about Carrie James Marshall, and just, you know, the way he uses like a very literal kind of depiction of Blackness as a way into Blackness as experience. I think that that is something that she's definitely experimenting with here, maybe more so in these really wonderful new tapestry works. Yeah. I mean, do you, you know, I would also say, yeah, when I'm just kind of thinking about these are a little more, you know, I think they also do operate like sketches. Whereas you know, the tapestry works, excuse me, are a little, you know, those are sent to a weaver, and it would, you know, they're so detailed with all of the pixels that it would be impossible to do by hand. So I think that she was also just interested in right, what does an analog practice mean? And, you know, she mentioned MS Paint, right? She didn't even talk to me about a sketchbook. She's like, oh yeah, I'm just thinking about when I was a kid and I used to play around in MS Paint, and I want those kind of gestures in the tapestries.
So, wow. And these are, you know, they're substantial, right? They're not small in terms of sizing and her color palette and so on.
Yeah. I think, I mean, so there are a few small ones that we've recently added to the presentation that are 30 by 30. But yeah, a lot of them are at this scale, right? Between maybe 45 and 60 inches in both directions.
That's cool. Yeah, I really enjoyed, you know, with her that, you know, what you were saying about kind of the depiction of Black women, especially in internet culture and just like media culture in general.
Yeah.
And that mixture between this very kind of new technology approach alongside this very much kind of African-American aesthetic and tradition, because, you know, you call them tapestry, but one can also think about African-American quilting. Yep. And then also, you know, you mentioned Carrie James Marshall, Betty Saar. So she's certainly creating this with today's issues or questions in relation to technology, but then in the internet, but then also very much thinking about her history or her position within the history. So I really appreciated that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's, you know, when I mentioned the notion of the avatar, I think that's what I'm getting at, right? This notion between, yeah, I mean, I don't know why the word drag is in my head tonight. I think I was watching too much RuPaul this weekend, but you know, this notion of like how one presents and how, and what one is. And I think that, and yeah, I think that I see this, this particular series as a straight up exploration of that.
Yeah, you know, you were watching RuPaul, and I was actually watching a lot of old America's Next Top Model with Tyra Banks.
Oh my gosh.
And there is a lot of like, you know, African, like Black women question mark, like, let's not get into that conversation, but anyway, thank you so much, Kendra.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And I guess now we go into Nicole Bouchen Gallery. She's another dealer from New York, and she's actually showing an artist from Greece, from Athens.
Yeah, this is the first time that we're working with Panagiotis Lucas. He's actually an older artist. He's about 45 years old. He's been showing work for years, somewhat different, always figurative. He showed with the Breeder. He's had shows at State of Concept, the Dusty Foundation, which is actually how I found him. He was in a show there that Natalie Bell and Margot Norton curated. But they're just wild. You know, they're very psychological paintings, and some of them are quite large. This one is huge. It's like 86 by 74 inches. So really, really intricate. I mean, technically these paintings are just bonkers. I mean, they're so well done. But they serve, you know, as these montages in a way of, you know, they're very psychological. There's twists of irony. They're incorporating folklore and pop culture in a very interesting way. You know, I think we've all seen this figurative train for a while, and honestly, I've been a little bit over it until, you know, I just recently found his work over the summer, and it's just very different. His paintings, you know, I've asked him many times, you know, what are they narrative, you know, and sometimes he does give a little bit of way. But what he looks at these paintings as are almost novels without any linear time. So things are happening simultaneously, continuously, without beginning or end. So really just kind of unfolding on top of each other, within each other. Yeah, but they're wild, yeah.
Yeah, no, they're certainly wild and big. And, you know, I think that with this selection, I was really interested in, you know, we don't generally, like, you know, for a lot of people, when you think about contemporary art in Athens, they might not have a clear picture of it. So I like the idea of kind of shedding light to another part of the world, but also the fact that he is an older artist. Like, I think that, you know, another great thing about the fair, Nada, is that you can also kind of revisit some people that are also in a way emerging just because they don't have the same type of following here in the US, yet they have a great, strong and solid career and are making very solid work. I wanted to ask you, because they feel so real that they almost feel two-dimensional, right? But they're completely flat, right?
Totally flat, yeah. And in person, you almost, I mean, you could see the images and almost think they're sprayed, you know, but it's all brush, it's all by hand. And they take, I mean, each painting takes like 3 months. So they're very labor intensive, yeah. And they unfold as he's making them. So he'll make a few sketches, but you know, it really sort of happens once he puts brush to canvas.
And these are oil, right? That's why they're so lustre and so.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of tension in these works too. You'll see these figures, like that last image was of cats, you know, and that this is actually a play off of, well, it's called Hexen Sabbat, which translates to the witch's Sabbath. So it's unclear as to, you know, this human figure, if that's the witch or if these cats are the witch. So there's a lot of tension and push and pull between within each picture frame. And also certainly things are going off the frame, nodding towards certain elements, narrative elements. But yeah, they're you know, they're not didactic. They're not like an easy read. You really spend time just sort of like letting these elements reveal themselves to you, which is what I think is so interesting. Like I've been staring at these paintings endlessly and seeing new things.
Yeah, they certainly have like a psychedelic, have a trippy kind of aesthetic. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he goes quite small. These are like 24 by 11 inches, which are small. And these smaller works he actually considers to be more personal, more about the mood that he's in as he's painting. So less about novels, less about this sort of non-linear time. And they do sort of reflect and represent a moment of his own time, which I think is interesting because they are, you know, almost details from these larger paintings, but there's a nice moment of pause happening in the smaller paintings.
And now you mentioned that he showed at the new museum, right? Have he shown much in the US?
He's not really shown in the US, and actually the new museum curators curated the show with the Dusty Foundation. It was at the Benaki Museum in Athens. So not at the new museum.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
very, very limited, if even at all. Never had a solo show here. He was in a group show at the Palais de Tokyo years ago. But yeah, it's mostly been European support that he's had, both, you know, commercial and institutionally.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think it's always good, you know, as art connoisseurs to kind of see what is going out there in other parts of the world, and also a place like, you know, the middle of the world in the other side of the world being Athens, you know, because we hear a lot about Paris and London and other European cities, but you know, Athens is like, you know, kind of in the corner there, very close to the East world. So I think it's also very nice to see that. And I feel like this paintings, you know, it's almost like something that I can see like in your dining room, you know, very kind of big, or at the entry of your house, like kind of big and very, you know, intense. Yet, you know, they have a very like naive and beautiful approach to it. So I think these are neat.
Yeah, you don't see many European painters painting like this, you know, very fantastical, psychedelic. It's almost Fantasia on acid for me, is the way I've been describing it. But they're really spectacular in person too, just the level of detail and depth to the painting.
Definitely. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's nice to see everybody.
Likewise.
Yeah.
And I want to remind everybody as we move to the next slide that if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat and we will at the end of the conversation. Now, kind of going back to this trope of kind of, you know, a younger artist that are coming up. I was really also taken by this work by this guy called False Flag, which is from Long Island City. And this artist, Nigerian-American artist, Anthony Olumpini Akimbola. And particularly, like, I really like the abstract work that you're gonna see here, that you're seeing now, but then as we go on, you'll see some of his sculptures. So I also like kind of the versatility and how those two things are approaching, it seems like, and I'll you know, John Hudderson will join us from the gallery right now, so he'll tell us more about those specifics. But I also like how he was using sculpture and painting in different ways, yet to achieve something, the same end. Right, John?
Yeah, I think Bunry's had a pretty unusual practice because he doesn't really come from a traditional art background, so it allows him like more freedom to experiment. So there's like a pretty, there's some range in his work, but there's also like focus, particularly in the more recent work that he's been making out of durags. But I guess, like, you know, the main through line of his work is sort of fetishization. And
so just to make sure that, you know, so basically what you're seeing here is a composition made out of durags, correct? That he just gets in different colors. And for those of, not everybody might know what a durag is, so maybe we want to.
Yeah, and durag is like a nylon hair accessory. It's like traditionally worn by African Americans, and it's not that common in Africa. Right? And Bunmy grew up in between Missouri and Nigeria. His family's Nigerian, so that's like also a major sort of central aspect of his work, sort of navigating this, reconciling like these two, like, not
So
complicated, but you know, different identities of being an immigrant, a first generation immigrant, and like a young black man in New York City. He's pretty young, and his work has been fairly institutional until recently, you know. So,
what do you mean by that? That his work has been very institutional until recently?
I get most of his major works are, you know, for the past 3 years, are like 8 feet by 40 feet. You know, I like the Zucker Museum in Atlanta, and similar piece at the MAD Museum, the Museum of Art and Design in New York. He has a solo show coming up at the Kohler Art Museum in Wisconsin in February. He sort of works at he has been working at a fairly big scale. He takes a lot of risk, and he's very ambitious, which is sort of what we like to encourage, I guess, as a gallery, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, it's
Yeah, I mean, definitely the level of detail here. And also, you know, it's funny, as you were talking, you know, we talked about his experience as a Nigerian immigrant, as a Black man living in New York City, alluding to Black culture with the do-rag. But then, you know, his use of color is also very classic. And what I mean by that is, I think about, you know, even the grandfathers, right, of Western painting, like Albert's, and even, you know, African American color field painting, like that are also thinking about color as a way to you know, entice emotions, and psychology too. So you know, there's certainly, sure, there is that kind of identity question here, but then I also feel like there's like a very precise aesthetic investigation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know anyone else making, you know, paintings out of do-rags. So yeah, his stuff doesn't really look like anyone else's, which you know, I like a lot. And the smaller sculptures that he's been making are, you know, the basis of them are like small sculptures that are sourced from Nigeria.
Yeah, here are some of the sculptures, right?
Sorry?
Now here we went on to the sculptures.
Oh yeah, the sculptures are, I think, at the end. Oh yeah, there's the hat. Yeah, so the first sculpture is that hat, which is just a normal baseball cap that's coated in ground up cassava, which is a common ingredient. It's like a staple crop in West Africa.
Yeah, and also in some of the parts of the Caribbean as well, because of the African slave trade.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's, yeah, I mean, I've never seen a piece like that, you know. Yeah, it's a sort of a fight. Yeah, I mean, he was born in 1991, and sort of like rare to see someone like take actual risk without, you know, just sort of casting about and like trying to find a a signature style. That there's a lot of pressure, especially among his peers, that to like and especially among young Black artists, to make the same kind of work if it becomes in demand. And like, to his credit, he's resisted that to a certain degree, as much as possible. So he's a lot of integrity for someone his age.
That's interesting. I mean, this is also a really cool little sculpture that it feels like a traditional African sculpture, but it also has like a contemporary flair to it.
Yeah, so those are that particular type of brush is like a sort of like iconic brand for sort of I mean, I know they cost like $50 each, but he sources the sculptures like directly from Nigeria through his like cousins and stuff, and then he sort of experiments with adding contemporary elements like these like hair combs and things like that. He's making some really interesting work.
Awesome. Well, like I said before, I really, kind of like his versatility a lot, and also the themes that he's presenting in his works. So that was very exciting. And also kind of this, right now, African contemporary art is really booming, and African diasporic art as well. And kind of seeing all those connections in his work, I find it, very up the moment. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting it. Yeah.
So now another gallery that I selected was Proyecto Ultravioleta, which is a gallery from Guatemala. And I was really interested in also showing kind of works that are coming from Latin America. So one of the artists here, Nalfos Ramirez Figueroa, is an artist that has been getting a lot of attention due to his sculptures, but also his performances. And he had one recently at the Guggenheim Museum, and I'm sure Stefan Benchuan, the gallerist, is going to tell us more about it. So Stefan?
Hi, Maria Elena, and hi, everyone. Thank you for the inclusion of Nalfos's work. Indeed, it's super exciting to be showcasing his work. Nalfos is actually born in Guatemala, but emigrated at a very early age with his grandmother as a refugee to Canada, where he grew up. In general, something that I find really interesting with Nalfos's work altogether is that it really varies not only among media, but also in terms of the different issues that he's undergoing. He uses performance, sound, drawing, sculpture, and conjures very different representations to explore themes of loss and displacement in general, which are really interesting, and also cultural resistance, and in particular the Guatemalan Civil War. Yet he also has a series of very, very personal sculptures and very personal works. And it's something that I really like about his work altogether, is that it's very multi-layered. And there's so many references to archaeology, to architecture, to history, to the Civil War, to art history, but also to his dreams, also to science fiction, you name it. There's just so many layers, and also a big dose of humor. In particular, the works that we were actually showing or presenting at NADA, it really came about from conversations with him and with the other artists that we're showing, Akira y Kesoy, of how they've been dealing with this year, and just, I guess, the yearning for nature and the connection that they've been desiring to plants, in particular house plants. Nalfos in particular, he says that oftentimes when he's actually feeling quite down, he somehow thinks of himself as a plant, or just tries to think of himself kind of in the way that nature oftentimes kind of regenerates from something from difficulty or from death, like how life actually springs up. So this particular work is actually a foot, which also has to do with this exploration of the body. But it's actually, there's like a pistol coming out sort of like an anthurium flower. So it's just a very beautiful object in the end, and in a way also connecting to different artists in art history. One that I actually always think of in relation to Naufus, and especially with this work, is Robert Gober. And there's something so personal about that. And so it's just a really nice way to think of the moment and think of the times that we're going through. We have a separate sculpture that we're showing, and that's also in expanded polyurethane, which is known in the US as styrofoam, with epoxy resin and mineral pigments. And that's a torso and with an arm, and instead of veins, you actually have what seems to be like branches or leaves that are coming out. So again, it's just a very personal relationship to the body and way of producing work. And something that I really value with Naufus is just that he's been able to really develop a very singular language for his works, something that's very his own, both in terms of the materials that he uses, the finishing, and also just the subject matter. So it's just really exciting to be showing his work all together.
I mean, I think that certainly in times that we're living, we do need a lot of humor to be able to kind of cope with the everyday. So that's something that I appreciate a lot about the work. Also that, you know, in a way, it feels a little bit conceptual to me, which I think that that's certainly a trend, or not a trend, a very strong approach in Latin American art. So I also kind of appreciated that sensibility. And certainly the fact that he's also created, you know, he's trying to grapple, like a lot of us, we're trying to grapple with what's happening in our world. So how he takes that, you know, moment, you know, of questioning in terms of of reflection, to really create works that are also very kind of whimsical and funny, yet have a very poetic approach towards the situation, which is this almost kind of going back to nature and relying on the body, especially now that so many bodies have been lost, you know? So there's like a lot of layers into this work that at first glance may appear just like a foot or just like an arm, but there's like a lot of in it that I appreciate.
Yeah. I mean, that's really something, it really sums up Naufus as a whole. I can just say from personal experience, I've had the privilege of working alongside him for the last 10 years. And what I find really remarkable is that each time that I see him, and I spend a lot of time with him, we have a very good relationship, I learn things about him that I didn't know. And he's just kind of like very like intelligently, but also very subtly, like just leaving little like pieces of information and of knowledge around. And if we actually are attentive enough, we can just start to like piece all of those together. And I think that's like a type of game or play that he also does with his work. He's very aware of what he's doing with each work, but with time, you start to see the way that all of those things connect to his practice and all of the different ideas that he's approaching, which I find pretty remarkable.
Yeah. And again, it's also nice, you know, within this entire selection, you know, we have seen a lot of different topics, and here's one kind of, you know, speaking about the current kind of pandemic and all that, but also sculpture in a very kind of like a sculptures, you know, that I also think it's neat to think about in terms of contemporary art, artists that are very much dedicating themselves to the sculptural practice. So that's really cool.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Maria Elena.
No, thank you. Now, the next gallery, you know, if we're now in Guatemala and kind of going to this journey around the world, is a gallery that is actually in San Juan, in Puerto Rico, and it's Embajada. And they have, I have to say that they also have a really, like, if for anybody that's here that is interested in learning more about contemporary Puerto Rican art, you know, in the islands, certainly they have probably the strongest selection right now in the fair. So I certainly recommend seeing the other selection if you're into that type of work, which I am. But the work here that we're seeing actually is from a woman called Claudia Salinas Peña. She's actually Latinx, right?
Well,
Well,
that
she was-
depends how you define Latinx.
Well, let's not get into that because that's like another panel. But what I'm trying to say is that she's a person of Latin origin, living and working in the US and very much influenced by what it means to be here, right? Because she was also part of the Whitney show about Latinx art, correct?
Yeah, that was definitely a formative Latinx show called Pacha.
Yakta Wasichai.
Thank you. Curated by Marcela Guerrero. And in that, for that show and for the last several years, she's been researching Aztec imagery and indigenous imagery to create narratives between the modern and the indigenous. And she's shifted since her research from Aztec coding to Mayan architecture, and that's what this series represents. The work, this series specifically reflects her research of the Mayan temple in Chichen Itza. Chichen Itza, yeah, one of the most visited archaeological sites in the Mexican peninsula, and that's one of the also one of the themes that she's interested in exploring, which brings the work into a political realm and social realm about tourism and the impact of tourism on these sites, on Mexico, and in some of her video work, she makes more direct political points about water usage and inequalities.
There's something important to mention about this site, Chichen Itza, which is in Yucatan. It's one of the most visited sites, as Manuela was saying. But twice a year during the equinox, there's a very interesting phenomenon that it creates. The sun hits the structure in certain way that it reflects the shadow of a snake. So that gives title to her new exhibition, It's Can, which it's Maya for It's is magic and snake is can. So she explored this topic, which is, as Manuela mentioned, she's been also exploring through the Aztec culture, but now exploring through the Mayan sculpture. This sculpture that we're seeing here, that is Kukulkan, is currently in the exhibition from Proxico that we're doing in collaboration with our colleagues from Proxico here in New York. Her first solo exhibition here in New York. And it's 7 panels. They're in a gradient of different green tones to reflect, the idea of the changing colors of the sun, and specifically also the reflection of the water. That's why the repetition of the image of the pyramid.
You know, something out of her work is that, even she's making all these indigenous references. However, but also she's making a lot of like modern references, the one color, the geometric forms, right? Which you also see a lot in her sculptures.
Mm-hmm.
There's like this mix between kind of, kind of embedding her culture within all these very kind of rigid, kind of Western ideals.
Yes, Claudia originally studied painting, and if you see her older works, that's when I met her. It was definitely like the beginning of those modern, more formal aspects of that we can see in her work now, but of course with her own creations. And what is very interesting is also to see how she translate painting into this new body of work, through the wax paintings or the sculptures, which she covers them. How do you call them?
The image transfer.
No, I'm talking about
the thread.
The thread,
the color
sorry.
Thread.
Yeah, so she paints a thread to create like a very beautiful degradation of color, always making reference to the source of the topic, specifically in this one. So it's water. So she's playing with different tones of green and blue.
Beautiful.
But and there's a sculpture that we're seeing right now. I don't know if there's a general view where we can see the whole sculpture, but definitely I had a really interesting conversation with her of how it's a new version of the pyramid from Sol LeWitt in a way, but it's her own way of dealing with this aesthetics and topics now.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, I feel like indigeneity and Latinx art, it's something that it's coming up a lot, or it's, perhaps, especially when it comes to Latinx art, something that we're going to listen more about in the coming years. So I think that it's interesting to, I wanted to include her here to also bring light to that market, right? Which is still very accessible, and which, there's a lot here to unpack. So, and again, I think that if everybody's in the call that's interested in Caribbean art from Puerto Rico, certainly I think that Embajada has the best selection to look at. So I also, I think it's important. That's why I included you all in this selection. So thank you.
Thank you, Maria Elena. And it's nice to see all of you after a long time. I wish we were in Miami.
Well,
and if I could just plug that this show will be up through December 23rd in Proxico on Orchard Street. So holiday things to do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So from Embajada, we moved to LA. And so, I have to say I did not know the work of Forrest Kirk. And I was kind of taken by it because I kind of like the abstraction. Yet again, it reminded me of kind of like the African-American narrative of color field painting and abstraction, which is also very in right now, kind of like a moment in history that it's a lot of curators and museums are looking to. So I guess Micha, you're here from Parrish Haynes Gallery in LA.
Yeah, in Los
So
Angeles.
perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about the work.
Okay, yeah, so let me give you a brief overview of Forrest in general. He was born in 1975 in San Diego, California, and he currently lives and works in Los Angeles. We recently had a show of his this past summer at the gallery entitled Nine Fists, where the thematic symbolism of the show focused on the Black Power raised fist in protest against systems within institutions, politics, and racial injustice. He referenced this symbol to address the plight of developing individuality within the context of a shared struggle. So a lot of his works deal with people as a whole and talking about like successfully emerging with a sense of a definitive purpose. And before that, he's done a series of works that are based off of literature, like Ralph Ellison's The Invisible Man from 1952, dealing with a critique in the anxieties of Black and white people within the societal structures. But this series of work is his most recent that we're happy to present for NADA. It's a little bit more formally abstract than his past works, and they deal with the universal sense of like humanness in regard to love and loss. These works in particular depict abstractions of emotional like phases throughout a traumatic like relationship and experience in general. That's why they're titled Self-Portrait, Issues, Nosy, Power Couple, and Heartbreak. So he's really like trying to depict each sort of feeling within a relationship.
I see. So as you know, 2020 has been a very, dynamic year, for lack of a better word. And hearing you speak, I think a lot about the summer that we just had in terms of ideas of social justice. Like, would you say that all of these works are also trying to meditate on all that or process everything? Yeah, that's.
Yeah. So a lot of his work is dealing with social justice and sort of just like structures within society. He's done a lot of like paintings of policemen and just like the injustice that people of color have been under throughout the past few years. And all of his works also incorporate Gorilla Glue, which is hard to tell in these images, but he uses it as sort of a foundation to take back this like racist term and transform it into something new and something that he can call his own.
And on a technical level, so is he painting the background as well? And also, what's the paint that he's using?
So for these paintings, he's using the Gorilla Glue and acrylic. solely. So it's just those two, but sometimes he uses oil paint or just like non-typical art materials as well.
Mhm.
Very, like very vibrant pigments that he's using.
And he also paints the background.
He paints the background, yeah.
Okay.
So these ones all have sort of like a taupe color in the background.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is this the last slide or, oh no, there's more, yeah. Yeah,
Before being an artist, he was a computer programmer. So
okay, yeah, because he's older, right? Yeah, he graduated recently from school.
he graduated, I believe in.
I thought I saw 2019.
No. He had
No?
a show this past year. He did a Bed-Stuy residency, I believe, last year. So maybe that's where you got the 2019.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But he sort of took a turn like mid-career, changing from computer science into art. But he'd been an artist since he was young.
Of course, no. And that's also neat. I think that, you know, we started this presentation, you know, with emerging artists, and it's also nice to see, you know, just an artist at a different moment in his career, somebody that had a career and something else, and then went into the arts and what they're creating. You know, I think that's also part of the art industry, our historical narrative. So that's also pretty neat.
It definitely adds to this like identity that he's like trying to find, which
yeah,
to his work.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think that, like I was mentioning before, you know, what I appreciate about his work is, you know, how he's certainly trying to digest as best as he can and process just everything that's happening, and everything that, you know, for somebody like him, an African-American artist, has been happening, but now it's just more public. So, and as if you, in the overall selection, you certainly see how artists in general are grappling with 2020 and really everything that happened even before we got to 2020. 2020 has been kind of like the where things are just more material, but certainly certain struggles like in terms of health or here in terms of social justice, you know, how media affects women, Black women have always been present. So, so yeah, so that's certainly one reason why I think it's important to include him within this selection. So thank you.
No, thank you. I appreciate you.
You're welcome. Now, the last gallery that I selected was an artist from Peru, from Lima. I do not think, unfortunately, I think the gallery wasn't able to join us this afternoon, but actually William Cordova is an artist that I actually, you know, full disclosure, did an exhibition at the Pérez Art Museum Miami where I work, and he's an artist based in Miami. So certainly if you, for everyone interested in work that is being produced here in the city, William is one of those artists to look at, and has been working for a long time. And he is very interested in mixing his own Latin American Peruvian background with his experience here in the United States, which I think that's how we're talking earlier about defining Latinx art. That's the way I define Latinx art. It's really artists of Latin American origin that allude to their experience, their culture of Latin American, but then also their own negotiations living here in the United States. And he's also very interested in African American narratives and discourse. So here you see works that are very much inspired by certain tenets of African American abstraction, yet he also alludes to Peruvian culture, but more specifically Inca and indigenous Inca traditions of weaving, of textiles, and also other tropes within that culture. You know, the gallery itself, 80 metros cuadrados or 80 meters square. It's perhaps one of the best known galleries in Lima. So for anybody interested in Latin American art and to learning more what's happening in Peru, I would certainly recommend you this gallery. Oh, Livia's here. So yes, please take the, yeah.
Hi, sorry, I'm not Livia, I'm Celia. I work at the gallery with Livia. She had an emergency show, so she asked me to jump in and talk a little bit. I mean, you were.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, of course. Sorry, I'm a little bit late.
Okay.
But I mean, you gave a really good intro to William's practice. As you mentioned, he is based in Miami, but is originally from Peru. He moved to the US when he was very young, and he lived in various cities around the US. So he came from Lima. He lived in New York, in Houston, Chicago. So he's an artist that has carried all of those different cultures and bits of every place that he's been to, and he mixes all of it with his Latin heritage and Peruvian, elements from textiles, architecture, the cosmovision. He's
drawing from a lot of different references.
Exactly. So this particular piece is called Rumimaki, and it's a very good example. Rumimaki was a fighting Indian martial arts technique that had various levels, and included in the upper levels philosophy, astrology, and all of these. So not only fighting, but these higher learning techniques that were supposed to compose a whole. So what's important here also is that he doesn't paint, and so these are all not all of his work, but much of his work is composed of little pieces of scrap paper taken and colored with recycled paint from hardware stores. So physically and conceptually, these are pieces that really grab a bit of everything. In these details, we can see there's always traces of hair. There's, I think someone else was mentioning in their presentation that they leave all of these clues and different elements that allow you to read so much of the history of the own artist, but also of all of the cultures that he's talking about, right? So like you were saying, there's, in here, it's mostly textile works that he references. In the next work, which is Gold Leaves, is more of the architecture, the planos, the maps.
Yeah, like the layouts of buildings, right?
Yeah.
And these are layouts of like sometimes pre-Columbian Inca buildings, correct?
Correct. Which he mixes through collage with modern architecture too, with modern and contemporary objects, references. Here in the details, we see these more contemporary buildings mixed with all of these other references from pre-Columbian times, which is the lines which are the maps, but also the materials, gold leaf, which he often uses in his work, is also a reference to the colonies and the Spanish colonization as this, precious material that, unfortunately is part of the of the American, Latin American culture. Yeah, that's one of the little drawings. So he does make a lot of reference to this bigger cosmos with exactly another detail that he takes from the past, but also tries to connect to the present.
Well, thank you so much. I'm wondering, and here's nice because you can see the scale of the work. And again, I do want to say that, for anybody interested in Latin American art, specifically from Lima, or in general, certainly 80 metros cuadrados has, perhaps the strongest selection, or if it has the strongest selection. I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it because it does. So as you can see, I mean, if anybody has any questions, please put it in the chat. But as you can see, the selection was very much geared into things that are happening right now that I think that, you know, for all of us who are in the art industry or collectors and so on, you know, these are the topics that a lot of artists are working on: ideas of social justice, the current pandemic, ideas of migration, politics, and also kind of the fervor of like emerging alongside with more established artists. So I think that's a really kind of nice overview of some of the things that you'll see in the fair. But if anybody has any question, now is the moment, yeah, or comments. I don't see any questions. So I will say though that there's a lot of great things in the fair. There's also some galleries from Asia, which I thought they were pretty neat. So I certainly recommend you to take time to see all the presentations because it's quite, it's very diverse in terms of where different galleries are coming from, etc.
Yeah. Just wanted to add that, yeah, the fair's looking really, really great online, and I hope everybody will tune in tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern time when we launch. And yeah, so lots of great work. And thank you so much, Maria Elena, for being here, and for all the galleries for being here and taking the time to talk about your work.
Heather, I have a quick question because people are asking me, or in the chat, there's a question about can the contact list be shared? Like, is anybody in the call, how can they get the list or contact information for the galleries?
We could, Liz, should we do that with that?
Yeah, just pop the email address in the chat and I'll send that over to them.
Sounds great.
Great. So if anybody,
yeah, or if you don't get to put your email in the chat before we end the call, you can always email us at info@newartdealers.org and we can send it that way.
I'm just popping my email address in there. Actually, that might be easier.
Or Liz.
So if anybody's interested in the list, in the list and contact info, please email Liz. And actually, Diane, hi Diane, nice to see you. So if anybody, so if interested, oh, people are putting their names on the chat. So thank you, and thank you so much for taking, you know, your Monday afternoon to join us, and happy Art Week. Oh, hi Adriana too. So many friends. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. We are definitely sad not to be able to be in person, but it's nice to see people in their squares too. So.
Yeah, and you know, beyond everything, I'm happy I'm healthy. So like every time I get sad about not seeing everybody, I'm just, at least I'm not like, you know, in a ventilator or something like that. So and that's the most important thing. We'll have another Art Basel next year and we'll party like it's 1999.
Not a wave will return. Better than ever.
Yes. Hi, Susie. Well, thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria Elena.